It's only been a couple of weeks since the Flash tape premiered, and I think we can already consider it dead. A minute's silence for Flash. Mind you, I am a fan of the Flash and I did want the movie to do well. But so is the life of DC fans. We're like the Cruz Azul of superhero movies. But well, why is it said that the Flash film is dead? Let's take the numbers extremely seriously. Before its premiere, the most conservative projections of the film said that it would open with a box office between $60 and $70 million. However, the Flash only managed to get $55 million. It should be clarified that the predictions that the studios regularly publish are somewhat low, so that then the headlines will say the Flash movie exceeded all expectations. For context, Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3, a superhero movie with a comparable budget. It expected between $110–120 million, which it achieved. However, it may not have had a strong opening weekend. But there was hope that the film would be so good that people's recommendations would keep it afloat. Unfortunately, this was not the case, as The Flash suffered a 79% drop, the largest in superhero film history. Only after Morbius. So well, what is the situation? The Flash had an estimated budget of $220 million, and so far it has only been able to recover $210. No, it's not close to breaking even after accounting for advertising, marketing, and the cinema chain's share of revenue. What number would look good for The Flash's final collection? About $600 million at least, something that now seems impossible. For context, The Batman grossed $771 million with a budget of $180 million as. But what happened with this movie? What was the big mistake Warner made? And above all, what can it do to avoid falling into the same pitfall? That's what we're going to talk about today, as we're going to perform an autopsy on the Flash tape. To fully understand how the Flash tape died, first we have to talk about a phenomenon that happens to superhero tapes, something I like to call the superfall. What is the superfall in superhero cinema? No, I'm not referring to that cool way of landing. I'm referring to this strange phenomenon where superhero cinema suffered a massive box office drop from the first to the second week of release. For instance, The Flash had a 79% drop, Quantumania had a 69% drop, Love and Thunder had a 68% drop, Multiverse of Madness had a 67% drop, which is unusual for blockbuster films. Mario Bros had a 36% drop, Top Gun Maverick had a 33% drop, and Aguatartan only fell 18%. What does this mean? It means that we superhero movie fans tend to watch the films on the first weekend in droves, while the larger audience takes its time. However, if the movie resonates with the audience, the drop-off may be much less. That's the case with Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3, which had a drop-off of 47%, or Across the Spider-Verse, which had a fall of 54%. Understanding this is crucial, as a superhero movie relies heavily on its opening weekend to recover a significant portion of its investment at the box office. And Flash was far from this. The other option, as I mentioned, was for the movie to connect with people, and as a result of this, the movie would stay afloat, but this did not happen either. This phenomenon is commonly attributed to superhero genre fatigue, which refers to the growing popularity of this concept, that we have already seen so many similar movies that the audience is getting tired. I recently made a video where I analyzed the box office and critical approval of all superhero movies from the past 10 years. If you want to learn more, I'll leave the information here for you. But specifically, it might be because we are now seeing this concept of multiverse everywhere at the same time. Did you see what I did there? I used the title of a multiverse movie to talk about how we're already… Yeah. If you explain it, it's worse. The concept was seen in superhero films like No Way Home, Multiverse of Madness, What If series, and Across the Spider-Verse. Regrettably, these productions preceded The Flash's release. Interestingly, if The Flash had been released on time, it would have premiered before all the other movies, since its original release date was March 23rd, 2018. In other words, 5 years ago. The Flash was the first superhero in history strongly linked to the multiverse concept in comics. In my opinion, he is the superhero that best utilizes this concept in his stories. Although Flash pioneered this in the comics, it feels different for the general public. It feels as if DC is reusing Marvel's concepts, and not in the best way. I personally enjoyed the Flash film as it has beautiful moments. However, I completely understand why people are focusing on the poor computer-generated imagery. I mean, those babies really look like they're going to appear in the night. Another very important point is that surely Warner Brothers thought that having several Batmans in one movie would have an effect similar to what was experienced with the 3 Spider-Man. And this was far from the case. Why is that? We have to start by saying that, in theory, the comparison is valid. Spider-Man is the most lucrative property of Marvel, just as Batman is the most lucrative of DC. However, the big difference lies in the time when all these tapes involved were released. Tobey Maguire's last cinema appearance was 15 years ago, Andrew Garfield 9 years ago, while the last time we saw Michael Keaton as Batman was 31 years ago. And this makes all the difference in the world. Think about it this way. If someone was 8 when Spider-Man 3 premiered, they saw The Amazing Spider-Man at 15 and experienced No Way Home at 22. According to a 2021 survey, the average age of the audience for superhero movies falls between 18 and 34 years old. You don't fit into that category anymore, right, Tata? That's the trend. I can enjoy them whenever I want, you see. On the other hand, if someone was 8 when they saw Batman Returns, they would get to watch The Flash at 39. Something that breaks the trend. Would The Flash have been better off if it had gotten Christian Bale? I genuinely believe so. And it's not that they didn't try, because according to Kevin Smith, Warner Brothers tried to convince Christian Bale to return as Batman in the Flash film many times. But the actor refused, as he has said many times that the only way he would return to play Batman is with the blessing of Jesus Christ. Having said this, I believe the plan was to put him in a shift at the end, and that's it? If this was the case, it likely wouldn't have been as appealing or attracted enough attention to motivate ticket purchases just for a change. There's a big difference between showing 3 Spider-Men actively participating in the plot and simply including a brief cameo appearance. Without spoilers, those who've seen The Flash know it has impressive changes that unfortunately remain just changes. The brief appearances are beautiful fan service but may not significantly impact the box office, especially compared to seeing 3 Spider-Men collaborating in the plot. Another very important factor in the death of the Flash movie. Do you really have to keep calling it the death of the Flash movie? Isn't that overdramatic? It died with my illusions of seeing a Batman movie about the future son. As I said, another very important factor in the death of the Flash movie. Our movie watching habits have shifted significantly post-pandemic. Have you ever recommended a movie and the first thing they ask you is it already on Netflix or on one of those services? Don't you get the impression that people are increasingly disregarding cinema as their first option? If you answered yes, it's not just your impression. Because according to a statistic from April 2022 conducted in the United States, 52% of people choose not to go to the cinema. The percentage was only 15% before the pandemic. Mexico has a very similar story. IMSSINE figures show that before the pandemic, Mexicans went to the cinema an average of 2.7 times per year, while in 2022, it was only 1.3, which represents a fall of 56%. Why is this happening? During the pandemic, studios like Warner simultaneously premiered big movies in theaters and on HBO Max. Conversely, companies like Disney released numerous films directly to streaming or digital purchase. The studio's strategy was to attract audience to their streaming services. Everyone wanted to be the new Netflix. But well, it seems that these actions and the fact that for a long time we couldn't go to the cinemas made people feel more and more comfortable with the idea of watching new movies at home. At a fraction of the price, the only thing they had to do was wait a bit. Yes, it's true that going to the movies is an experience that can't be completely replicated at home, but is it really worth paying for this experience for any movie? I think many people are asking the same question. According to Canacine, the average movie ticket price in Mexico is 66 pesos, $3.8, not including the cost of concessions. Well, a trip to the movies with your partner? That's why I suggest a trip to the movies with your best friend. You'd have about 400 pesos or roughly $23 left depending on the combo and cinema. If we take into account that it could pay for 2 months of any streaming service you want, it's understandable why many people are now more selective when watching a movie in the cinema. That's why films that promise a visual spectacle like Top Gun or Aquaman are doing better at the box office. Or in case of Mario Bros, are you going to tell your kid that you're not going to take him to see the first decent Mario Bros movie in history and just let me? Yes, I'll take you. This then leaves The Flash in a very bad place as it neither deviates much from other superhero movies nor is it visually impressive enough to stand out. June was highly competitive for blockbusters with premieres of Across the Spider-Verse, Transformers, The Flash, Elemental, and Indiana Jones scheduled. 5 films that had million-dollar budgets, which of course expected big earnings, which never arrived. Remember, people rarely go to the cinema, let alone to watch 5 movies in a month. In fact, as of today, from the top 10 highest-grossing films of 2023-5 are seen as economic failures because of high production costs. Large budgets suggest companies anticipate substantial profits, which often did not materialize in these instances. Lastly, this is a crucial point. This movie got caught in the crossfire between Warner Brothers' bureaucracy, Ezra Miller's scandals, and feuds among fans. James Gunn has discussed his new DC universe and upcoming projects extensively. This makes upcoming DC films like The Flash, Shazam 2, Aquaman 2, and possibly Blue Beetle feel as though they belong to a universe that's no longer relevant. Treating them as mere transition projects discourages many fans, making them ask, why bother? Not only that, but the Flash movie also had to reshoot several scenes to add, change, or remove elements to better adapt to the new DC universe. which greatly increased their production costs and made it more prone to failure. The more a movie is invested in, the higher the expectations. Also, the DC fandom is highly fragmented, since there is a good part that wants the Snyderverse to return, while another group wants the new tapes to move as far away from it as possible. Here are some hard truths that both sides may dislike. The return to the Snyderverse appears increasingly unlikely. All the actors involved are already in other projects, and honestly, can you imagine Henry Cavill returning to DC after what Warner did to him? Didn't you just mention Superman when you mentioned Henry Cavill? In my heart, son, he always will be, but officially he is not anymore. The count still stands. We'll see if you can make it to 10 videos, but I'll ensure you won't. Whether you like Snyder's style or not, the DC Universe's approach in cinema has been the only one that truly feels distinct from Marvel's. Something that, so far, the latest movies have not been able to do in cinema. And I think that has to do with the fact that so many of us long for the Snyderverse, because they still haven't offered us anything else that proposes a different alternative. In the interconnected DC Universe, they have done it with the Batman, they have done it with Joker, but not in the interconnected universe itself. When you look at the whole picture, you realize that the scandals of Ezra Miller unfortunately had nothing to do with the poor reception of the movie. In fact, this failure wasn't even because the movie was bad in itself. Instead, it was due to factors like the movie looking very similar to what we've already seen. The film struggled to stand out in a highly competitive environment where cinema going is increasingly considered. It was burdened by an extremely high production cost due to Warner Brothers' internal bureaucracy, and it didn't excite the fans. The basis of these types of films, as the tape feels like a remnant of a universe that was something that is no longer valid. Warner Bros., for their part, is taking matters into their own hands because, well, they haven't had a major commercial success since The Batman. Recently, it was announced that Warner just signed a contract with Synalytics, a company that uses artificial intelligence to predict consumption patterns in audiences. With this, Warner intends to make their next decisions, that is, which projects are approved and which are not. Wow, did they apply the plot of the villain from Space Jam 2? Indeed, son, it's uncertain if the new algorithm-based Warner will adhere to established formulas or innovate, or even continue to greenlight superhero movies, at least not in a shared universe. And with these big budgets, to better grasp superhero fatigue, I suggest watching my video analyzing the box office performance of all superhero films from the past decade. I think it complements today's information very well. If you made it this far, I assure you that you will like it. That's all for today. I am Go, the Geek Monitor, and keep looking beyond the obvious. Thank you.